Welcome to the university track, Secrets and Pitfalls to Taking Your Venture Global. My name is Erick Mueller, joined with our distinguished panelists. So we're going to jump right in. This is an interactive session. This is all of us working together to talk about kind of pitfalls and success to going global. With that, I'll introduce myself last. I'll have each panelist, Madie, Adrian, and Cynthia, introduce themselves real quick right now in about 30 seconds. So we'll jump in.
All right, my name is Madie Kern. I finished my PhD in mechanical engineering at CU December 2016 and have started a company around designing a more adjustable, affordable, and accessible prosthetic socket for people in the developing world.
My name's Adrian Tuck. I'm the CEO of a company in town called Tendril. It's about 140 people, software company. I've been an entrepreneur for about 20 years and have built 3 businesses before this one.
Good. And I'm Cynthia Banks. I'm currently on the faculty at the Leeds Business School, but prior to that, I started my first company when I was 24 years old. It was a global company. I was the CEO of that for 25 years, sold it, did 3 other ventures, and now I'm enjoying teaching up at the university.
And as I mentioned, my name is Erick Mueller. I'm faculty at CU as well, along with Cynthia. And I've built 5 ventures over the last 30 years. Our latest venture has 350 locations in 29 countries around the world. So I'll be sharing all the really bad mistakes I've made doing that, as well as a few things that we did right. By the way, before we get going, I want to mention up here on the board, I've never used this before. I think some of us have, so this could be a total cluster, but it might work out pretty cool. Let's use Slido. So pull out your smartphones, or if you have your laptop, go to slido.com, and then you'll be prompted for a code. Type in M as in Mary, 868. So M868. And we're going to kickstart things with a quick question, by the way, right off the bat. You can answer it in the next couple of minutes, but the question is, which country are you super excited to go adventure around? So let's see what kind of crowd that we have. So if you go to slido.com, enter that, you can go to the poll, and then you can answer that question. I'll share the results here shortly. What we'll use this for is for questions, obviously, and then you can upvote questions. So as you pose a question to the panel, simply upvote those ones that you're really interested in, and then I'll pose that to the panel. All right, so let's jump in here. Let's start by asking the crew here a very basic question. Should you go global, and why? So I'm going to tee this up for Adrian to get started because he's got kind of an interesting story around that. I'll let him share. So tee us up here.
Yeah, so,
should you go global?
I think the short answer is only very carefully. The slightly longer answer is, so in my background, my first startup was in the UK. UK is a very small market, so you're forced to go global pretty quickly just to grow because you don't have a large enough domestic market. In the other companies that I've built, I've gone sort of global in all of them. But in this latest business, we opened in Europe and in Australia and in Japan, all within about 12 months of each other. And I've actually shut all of those operations down in the last 18 months because they just became too distracting. They cost too much money. They're sucking in engineering resources that weren't needed. And I have a big enough domestic market that I felt that if I really focused on the North American market, I could get profitable, which we've done. And the global stuff was just taking away too many resources.
So let's tee it, thanks Adrian, let's tee it over to Cynthia that your entire venture was global. So I assume your answer would be yes, go global, but share a few thoughts around it.
Well, sure. I mean, my venture was a global education business, and pretty much my product was a global product. So I had to be doing work interculturally kind of from day one. But what was interesting is that it worked really well to be selling to US people something global, and that part had a certain sense around it. At some point about 15 years into my life cycle, I decided I would do it the other way, and I would start selling things not only in the US but around the world to those international audiences. And by and large, that created a complexity that even though I had been doing business in those countries, I had not been selling there. And I would say that probably was a pretty complex idea. We ended up being quite successful in a few places, particularly in Asia, and not so successful in places like Europe.
Thanks, Cynthia. So I'll chime in real quick, and then I'm going to tee up our next question for Madie. So my direct question is yes, you should go global for a couple of key reasons. One, one of our key strategies when we started Funovation, we created amusement attractions, by the way, for theme parks, so for Disney and Six Flags, etc. And one of our key strategic initiatives right from the beginning was to go global for one main reason, that was to add credibility and for marketing purposes. Because it was pretty damn powerful, and we did go global within 6 months of starting the venture. We were in Dubai and in Norway, and we did that by going to one of our trade shows. It's pretty powerful on our next sales calls to say, hey, do you want to be a part of our global network? And oh, by the way, we're in Dubai and Norway. And if your plunky little fund center in Philadelphia doesn't want to be a part of it, that's okay. But we're a worldwide kind of company. So I'm being a little facetious, but it really helped us with marketing. And then the second thing that's been a huge output for us is the injection of innovation. So being in almost 30 countries around the world, we get to see a new perspective that we don't see here in the US. And we incorporate that into our HQ operations here. And it certainly has elevated our work. So, Madie, first of all, share a little bit about your venture and about the really great work that you're doing with prosthetics. And share with us, how did you determine which country, because you've been to Guatemala, to South Africa. So introduce your venture a little bit more, and then why did you choose those countries in which to start your work?
Yeah, so I first got introduced to this work of in the prostheses field through a trip that I went to South Africa during my PhD. I had a 3-month summer side project essentially to work on while I was in South Africa, and to develop a prosthetic socket which could be more accessible to people living in the rural areas there. And just a little background on the socket. A socket for a lower limb prosthetic leg is a rigid shell, looks like a large cup that an amputee's residual limb will fit into, and then the rest of the prosthetic components connect to that. So that's the direct interface between the human body and the rest of the prosthetic leg. So my experience in South Africa and developing relationships with prosthetists, clinicians, doctors who are working with amputees to fit them with a prosthesis was one reason that I chose or wanted to go back to South Africa to continue this work. Not to say that there isn't this issue anywhere else in the world, it's all over the world. So mainly it's been my relationships with people that I've developed to take me to these different places. I went to Guatemala last October with a nonprofit group called Range of Motion Project, or ROMP, and they are a clinic in Guatemala to serve amputees with prostheses who can't otherwise afford them. They're receiving donated components or components from companies or from individuals that have been donated to them that they then kind of reuse what they can. And then they've trained prosthetists in Guatemala to run this clinic full-time there to make the sockets themselves, because it's a very individual component. So I would say the reason I've kind of gone to these different areas is the relationships of companies or individuals that I've met.
Okay, great. Thanks, Madie. So I was going to look at our poll results here real quick. Let's see what kind of crew we have. So folks in this audience are dying to go to Australia at 40%. Nobody wants to go to France? Oh, interesting. 4% want to stay here in the States, 25% in South Africa, and 25% in Chile. Super cool. All right, so I'll introduce another question here in about 5 or 10 minutes, another poll that you guys can have some fun answering. When we pause a little bit, I always like to kind of jump in with some key questions for our panelists, and let's get to know you guys perhaps a little bit more. How many of you are running a venture right now? Okay, about half. And of those that are running a venture right now, how many are doing product? Okay, and then raise your hand if you're doing service. So interesting. So wow, we've got a pretty even mix actually between ventures that are product and service. One last quick question to get a sense. How many of you are global right now? Okay, so just a handful. Okay, great. As a reminder, as questions come up, please pop them into Slido, and we'll start looking at those here in about 10 minutes or so. All right, next question. Let's get practical and give a few kind of meaty tips to folks that are looking to explore going global. And specifically, the question is, what's the criteria that you guys have used in determining if you should go global or not? And Adrian, why don't we tee it up with you to start?
I'd love to say that that we sort of analysed various markets and thought through all of this with great scientific process. But the reality is, for most of the ventures that I've done, this has started with a phone call from a large customer in Japan or in Australia or in Europe, and they've sort of said, well, we'd really like your product in our market, and and they wave big dollar signs at you, and you sort of look at this thing, and then you go through this process internally, in my experience, of sort of convincing yourself, it's not that hard. We just gotta, translate it into Italian, and we need to do a bit of this, and we need to do a bit of that, and you go through this process of thinking that through. And there's this big customer out there with this sort of big, we'll do a 5-year deal, $5 million, all these kind of things. And that's mostly the way that startups go international, is because they are pulled by the lure of a new customer or a new market, rather than some sort of standard analysis of market opportunities. Usually at that point, I then try to do a little bit of market opportunity stuff, but usually I'm just backing the numbers into the thing that I already want to do, which is go win this customer. So I'd love to. Other people probably do this better than me, but that's how I do it.
It's amazing as a startup what you do when a big suitcase full of cash comes your way.
Exactly.
Sure, we can do that. We'll figure it out. Cynthia, anything you'd like to add to that particular question?
No, but I would agree that sometimes it just kind of blossoms out of what people are asking you, and then you feel like you have to answer so you can go out and put it together. In my world, I think there was also, we were really late into the market in terms of being a person doing global education. And so when we decided to pick the country we started in, we actually picked it because there was a big market gap coming out of Australia and New Zealand in providing global education opportunities. And the reason why that was so relevant was that they were actually cutting out the funding in Australia for their universities as well. And so they were starting to look for other ways that they could actually earn money. And so when we started to look for partners and places that worked, I think having that kind of co-need created really interesting development opportunities. And we were able to develop our products and services a lot quicker when the host country or the host people we were working with also had a need for business development. So I would just say that partnership creates a kind of a bigger demand for it, and it helped us focus on where to go first.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Madie, I'm going to toss it over to you to ask the next question. So we hopefully have gone through some kind of deliberate process in determining yes or no in going global. If you're Adrian, not so much, but if you're me, no, just joking. But let's talk about, you decide, okay, we're gonna go global. There's benefits to it. We're gonna move forward with this. Again, the practical tips. What are the 3 or 4 steps that you went through in order to make that happen?
I think, like I said before, having connections in a place already made it easier, or just lit that place up. Like if I'm gonna go into the developing world, that's a huge space. I already know somebody in South Africa, let's start there. And where I'm at currently with the venture is not at the point of selling product yet. There's still some development work that needs to be done. And so having a space where I've already been doing development work with those people there was one of the factors that I looked at. The other thing I would say is for prostheses specifically, at least understanding what the cause of amputation was in all of the different areas was something to look at. Here in the US, the number one cause is diabetes, as well as is the cause in South Africa. And motor vehicle accidents are also high up on that list in South Africa. In Guatemala, diabetes is also the number one cause, but a place like Cambodia, war-torn area, landmines might be more of a concern. So maybe that is something that actually drives me to go to one area or another, or maybe it's not, but it's certainly something to at least know.
Okay, great. And I'll chime in a little bit on this one in case it's helpful to throw a couple things that we've done. Our first step was to really do some mapping around what's the highest concentration. So we did our research. Highest concentration of amusement parks that had money that were looking for new products. So we understood what general markets were the hottest. From that, we determined Central and Western Europe and Asia. So Asia is the fastest growing market in the amusement attractions industry. The next thing we did, and a practical tip for you guys, is talk to the State Department. They're amazing resources. I can't remember, Danielle Young is the person we work with. She's down on 16th Street Mall in Denver. And her job is to help us be successful in going global. And so she gave us contacts, she gave us shipping insights, VAT taxes. I mean, she laid out the entire kind of business plan for us. So I wouldn't have known that. I just happened to run across this when I was out networking. She's been a tremendous resource in her job. She gets, high fives when her company she works with export more. And then the third tip that I recommend, alluding to what Madie kind of mentioned, is who do you know, right? So we have some markets we go direct, some markets we go through distributors, and where there's a really strong distribution network, it can be a smart choice to do that. And you get to market a lot quicker. So we really leveraged our network and understood who in these markets we wanted to go global. Who were the influencers in those markets, and we partnered with them. So pretty intuitive, but I think important to remember to really network in those markets because it'll add credibility.
Eric, there's a difference between a product and a service company here, right? So if you're exporting a product, then there's one set of challenges you've got. If you're a service business, we're a software as a service company, then typically you're putting people on the ground, employees and various things like that. And so you then have to start thinking through, the local employment law, tax issues, recruiting, office space, all of those kind of things that you need in order to get your foot on the ground. So once you've identified your market and ideally your first customer, you quickly get into that second order set of things about, I've got to recruit some people, what are the employment laws in Italy or the Netherlands or whatever it is. And there, getting good legal and accounting, local legal and accounting people on your side to help you through all of those sort of things, so that you're really making the right decisions are important.
Good point.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, in addition to like the State Department, the U.S. Chambers of Commerce overseas, people that work with expat communities, are still really good connections as well. Number one, you're talking to a group of people that may have already had all of the challenges that you've had, who've kind of already had to cross some of those boundaries. And so every time we went overseas to a country to get to know it, we actually went and visited the U.S. Chambers of Commerce, which is crazy, but they were a great resource locally. And we were kind of on the same side of the fence, if that makes sense. We were all interested in the same kind of thing. So very, very good local resource.
Great points and great tips. That's certainly the focus of all of us up here, is to give you some meaty practical tips that you can walk away with. So feel free to jump in and ask questions, as we right away.
Go for it. I was just curious about like the banking situation. So if you're based in the U.S., if you go global, how do you guys handle that?
Well, then I can start. So it's quite complicated, right? So you have to put in local banking, especially if you've got payroll and all those kind of things that you need to deal with. You've got to deal with foreign currency exchange risk and those kind of things that your cost might be turning up in one currency and your revenue might be turning up in another. And how does that all play? You've got tax issues related to repatriating money when you need it and those kind of things. So it's not a small undertaking to put all of those pieces in place. That's the bad news. The good news is, for a fee, there are plenty of people who will advise you how to do that. Some governmental people who will do it for you, get you a certain way for very low cost or no cost, but then quickly you find you need lawyers and bankers to help you through it, accountants.
And I'll just add to that, and I think you're right, but the idea that you need to incorporate in countries that you really are going to do business with is very important. Yeah. And matter of fact, you don't want to operate, this is my experience, too long under the radar, like working with, but you have to kind of be careful. If you're going to do business in that country, you need to incorporate, get a bank account, pay the right taxes, deal with that system. There's very few ways to get around that.
And I would just add, or get a distributor and have them deal.
Yeah, or have a partner that's going to be local.
Which obviously is downsides, you lose margin, et cetera, but certainly that's their job, is to understand all the different rules and regulations. I'm going to tee up two more questions, and then we'll throw it to the audience. Some more kind of foundational questions. And this next one is, what did you wish you knew then? Right? So, and I'm going to tee this up for Madie initially. So, thinking back to those early days, what did you wish you knew then?
Well, anything. I've started this venture from an engineering background. I didn't have any business sense or knowledge really, and that's what this, up to this day, even still, it's a process of learning. I'm just trying to reach out to business people at CU or around the Boulder community. I think the Boulder community here, we're lucky to be in such a great spot where there are so many diverse experts and people with knowledge. I think, I think I would just leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. Adrian?
I would say that it takes 3 times as much time and 3 times as much money as you thought it was going to. Yeah. Would be thing number one. Thing number two, relevant to the current business that we've got, is that is all around data. So the US has very lax laws around how data is managed and controlled. That's not true in most of the rest of the developed world. So if you're building a software platform that uses data, there are all sorts of rules now that say that data can't come across borders and back into the US, which means that your help desk person who's trying to help somebody in France or something is not allowed to look at the data coming back through. And if you're using a supplier like SendGrid to send your emails out from your system and things like that, they have to be compliant with the same set of data rules and various things like that around how these systems work. So the rules around how data and data privacy crosses borders is pretty significant, are now pretty significant, especially if your headquarters is in the US, which has a sort of almost pariah status in the rest of the world related to the sort of how the US treats data.
That's a good point. Mine was a service business, so I'll just comment a little bit on people, because that was really what kind of caught us up. Knowing how employment works in other countries is important, and I'm not talking about just how you pay them. But it's interesting, like I'll give you an example about Australia. So, their hourly wage is $25 an hour, which is very different than most other places. In addition to that, when those employees, they all had to have 4 weeks annual holiday leave the first day you hired them, and then you had to pay them 17.5% more on top of their pay while they were on vacation. So they'd have a good time, I guess. But it was things like that, and I'll tell you why it mattered. I'd say, okay, well, that's Australia. We budgeted for that, and it makes sense. But I created a global organization. I had offices in Germany and France and London and Latin America and Australia and the US and everywhere else. And we were trying to create a cohesive company environment. But it was really interesting because I actually had to have different employee manuals and different, like, this is what you get for working for my amazing company, differently. So I had US people always calling me and saying, why can't we have 4 weeks holiday? And why don't we get 18% more? And it created internal issues among our staffing. And had I seen that coming, of course, I would have probably just set the stage a bit better. But then I had to kind of explain it all later. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Go.
What was your most profitable location?
My
Which
most
office?
profitable,
Yeah,
the Pacific.
Pacific.
Yeah, out of Australia and New Zealand. It may be because where I started, but it was super high demand, so it wasn't hard to sell it.
And I would add one final point, very much to what Adrian had mentioned. As you're doing your planning and going global, do all the research, have some, pro formas, some predictions, and then multiply by at least 2 or 3 in terms of resources needed, and 2 to 3 times as long. So even as much planning and analysis and everything that we did, there's just things that are going to go bump that you're just not going to be aware of. So plan, just understand it's quite an investment to be able to go global. Well, why don't we do this? So this is your time. So those are some foundational questions. Hopefully that were helpful. I've got some other questions we can tee up depending on how things come along. I'm thrilled to say that I think this Slido thing is kind of cool, but they said there were going to be 125 people in this session. I think we're a little lower than that. So that being said, thanks for those that have introduced questions. We've got like 4 questions in here. But since we have such an intimate small group, we can be traditional. And we'll just throw it off to you guys and ask questions from here. So floor is yours. Drill us with whatever you'd like, and I'll try and be fair as I go about the room here. Why don't you start us off? Go ahead.
Thanks. Well, congratulations on your successful ventures. How did you manage the legal aspect of being non-citizens of those countries, and how did you structure that? Because in certain countries, you get taxed more if you're a foreigner. So how did you manage that the legal corporation of an entity, especially as a foreign citizen?
Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, so there are lots of different ways for all the sort of reasons that no 2 countries have it the same. But in my experience, lots of times country asks that you have local nationals who become directors of the entity that you're forming. And so I am typically, we have Tendril has 4 or 5 businesses still out there, but I'm a director of those businesses. I take all my poultry income in the US and don't take any income from those businesses, and it just becomes an accounting and tax issue. So the local businesses pay the local employees who are locals from that operating company, and then I manage the holding company that sort of pushes all the business around, and I'm a director in all those holding companies and in those operating companies.
And I'll add, so on the service side, on the product side, for us, we deliberately chose not to have physical offices around the world. We go direct. But in terms of liability, product liability, et cetera, that is a part of our corporate, insurance policy, as well as if we go through distributors, then the legal onus is on them. But we go direct in about half of the countries, and we go through distributors in the other half of the countries. Actually, you want to go right from? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm new to all of this, but basically,
welcome to the adventure.
Yeah, and it has been an adventure. The past couple of years, this started as an idea. We wrote our own patents. We've, bootstrapped this whole thing. So we took our product to a trade show. We found that probably 75-80% of the interest was from distributors in other countries. So I'm trying to decipher, how much of this is applicable to a B2B type of situation, where essentially we'd be a wholesaler, they'd be. It's an integral type of product, so they'd be putting it on their product and selling it. And I'm trying to grasp, how complicated is that in my position versus trying to, what a lot of you have done, and where you have to have offices in those countries and all of that. And I'm avoiding all of that.
So what's the model? Ultimately, what's the model to go abroad? Do you have a product or a service?
It's a product. Yeah. So
Sure.
It's in the musical instrument industry. It's hardware for drums, and so we found a lot of these companies want to use our product on their drums and then sell it in their countries.
So, Madie, you want to start us off in terms of how you determine, whether to go direct or go through distributors, or how to handle that question?
Sure. I think knowing how people do it otherwise, like how your competitors do it, is a good way to start. Knowing how other people who are doing something very similar to you or in that space typically operate is a good way to start. For prostheses components, you're kind of, at least in the US, you sell them directly to a prosthetist, and then the prosthetist is going to get reimbursed by insurance, and the patient then has to pay for some percentage of it as well. So just know, for me, it was best to know how prosthetic components got sold and what pathway they took.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that real quick as well. One of the most important things we did was to understand the market and how do they currently buy amusement attractions. There are some markets that it's super normal to go through distributors, they're used to it, that's how they buy, etc. And such as Europe is very much that way, but Asia is not. Asia wants to go direct, they want to go right to headquarters, they want to work with the manufacturing company, etc. And so we set up our channels according to how people buy. Any additional thoughts that you guys would like to add to that question?
Mine's more on the service side, which isn't quite related, but I don't know if you want to say anything.
Okay.
Well, the only reason I was going to suggest it is that, often in a service-based business, you can kind of use a distributor as well. Like in many of my countries that I did business in, I would get a local company to hire people for me to perform the services, and then they would basically bill me for a service package. And so I didn't have to incorporate in every country I wanted to go to. Matter of fact, I only incorporated my company once the business got big enough that I wanted the control. And that was, what I'm talking about control, like full control. And that's particularly because we had enough business that we could support the office. But I had a lot of strategic partnerships where people hired my staff and we did the service and I didn't have to incorporate. And that's a really unique and interesting way to do a service business. Kind of distributing, sorry.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to go back to the incorporation status. So we're a global company right now that offers a SaaS solution, and we just have consumers that happen to be in Europe and Asia Pacific, and we haven't incorporated those areas. Is there a pivotal moment we should do that? Another market we're looking at that's emerging right now is China, for example, and we have to for obvious reasons of what their laws dictate. I'm just curious to what you think maybe I'm being naive about, like not incorporating, or
Yeah, I think I'm probably the most relevant person on this one. So it really does. So I'm a B2B2C company, so I sell my software to utilities, and they then sell it to they give it to their consumers. So mine's a slightly different model. But if you're direct to consumer, it really does depend upon the laws of the land. So you can get away with that for quite a long time, but at some point somebody might say, well, okay, this is. We have rules around the data centers need to be in these places. You have to host in certain places, and you can do that, via Amazon and other people in order to sort of build your distribution out. And I think you can get away in that model for a long time without needing to incorporate, providing you've got you can solve your data issues with partnering with AWS or somebody, and then you can just bill everything from the US.
That's where we are right now.
Yeah, I would do that for as long as your accountants tell you it's okay to do it. And then maybe slightly longer, actually.
Right. Next, why don't we go here and then here? Next, go ahead.
So this might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask anyway. I have a product that isn't patent, it's patent pending, and so I don't want to go global until the patent is official, correct?
It's a good Eric question.
It depends. Generally speaking, yes, there's a lot of other questions that I would want to ask. So what industry, are you in? Does the industry have a history of being pretty cutthroat and copying things? Is it super fast market? I've been beat my career before of waiting to market, to go to market. And then when I did go to market, I realized there were 2 or 3 other companies that beat me to it.
Without a patent, or they just went in without?
They just copy it and then just go.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it's probably not very helpful. I'd be happy to chat with you afterwards.
But you also need a patent in the places you're going as well. You have to be careful that patents are not global. So you might have a US patent, but it's not valid in Asia, for example.
Yeah, minimum $250,000 to get some kind of patent protection in another. We have 7 patents and 8 patents pending. We have no less than 12 companies copying exactly what we do, breaking our patent every day. We don't have
So get the lawyer bill and the patent at the same time.
Yeah. So for us, whatever it's worth, I'll conclude that statement with for us in patents. By far, the number 1 value has been the marketing value. The only patented laser maze in the world, and especially in Asia, that goes a long ways and sets us apart from our competitors. But unless you have a staff of 10 corporate attorneys on payroll, you're not going to be able to defend it anyhow. So just do it smarter and do it better. So I don't know if that was helpful.
That was helpful.
A couple of insights. Okay, right here.
Yeah, thank you. You guys are so impressive. And I'm a little teeny minnow swimming along. I have a manuscript that is really old. It's like 5,000 plus.
And it's currently under revision because I got feedback from a Yale scholar. It's, the story is originally from Iraq, and so are the things you're talking about going global? Like it's their story, but it's ours also. It's a Genesis that's 5,000 years old. And so I'd like to publish it internationally, and I want both e-copies and hard copies. And so I'm just kind of quietly working through my revisions, and that's why I'm here. Do you think that what you guys are talking about applies also to books? And, you know, us in Iraq, you know, we're not the best neighbors, and this might or might not help.
I don't have expertise in that particular market. Fascinating. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anybody in the audience might have a perspective on
Every country has
books.
different copyright laws, so that's why you work with a lot of the major publishers who have international departments who handle the various copyright laws in those countries. So similar to how the U.S. patent law, you have to watch out for patents there.
So it might make sense to hook up with a big publisher.
Yeah, or even some of the more independent publishers might have dabbled in international before, but if you want to protect that copyright, they have huge teams that handle that.
So at least be aware of international copyright law.
Correct.
Thanks for that tip. That was great. So you were open sourcing solutions here in Boulder. That's how this works. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a consultant that helps high growth companies scale, and we do a lot of work in the US around, like, once you're no longer in one headquarters, you're in these remote offices, and how do you scale things like culture? You talked a bit about compensation and some of the labor laws, the challenges across different countries. I'm curious if any of you have opinions about how you scale other things like company culture and across boundaries and across.
Well, let's see, things we did right and wrong. I think in company culture, there's different layers, aren't there? You know, there's the broad mission and the vision, and this is where we're going and what we're building. And then you've got these are our operating principles. And then you have but this is how we do it in this office. I think recognizing that there are different layers of that, I think you can easily take the broad vision, mission, you know, kind of this is what we do here. I think you can lay that down across a lot of things. But I think when you start getting to the other layers, just maybe defining for people that there are these different layers and making it clear why, you know, the UK operates differently than Australia, and it did, even though they're both part of the Commonwealth. You have that kind of, I think you can kind of explain it to people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would add to that. The mistake you can make is try to create cookie cutter cultures everywhere, right? And actually what you want to do is focus on your, I'm sure this is how you guide your clients as well, but core values that are true to the business wherever you are, and then allow these cultures to sort of to grow and evolve and adapt to their local markets, you know, in a way that's consistent with the overall sort of vision of the company.
But let me give you a quick example. Like, you know, when you say inside of a culture of a company, service to others, service to each other, you know, we should be good with each other. Well, the biggest fights I ever had in my company was between my German office and my US office. Because every time they wrote each other emails, they all thought that they were yelling at each other. And I would just spend all day in my office being like, are you kidding? Like, get on Skype or Zoom or something, you know. And you have to be careful because the expectation for what it means to be of service to each other is different. For an American, that's flowery, lovely language that, you know, hey, how was your day? And it's so good to hear from you, and thank you for writing, and then we do our business. I'm sorry, but in Germany, it's like, I want this now. Could you please provide it? Yeah. So I think you have to be kind of aware of how cultural context is laid down in some of those thoughts.
Yeah, this topic of culture is, I think, a really important one. Let's maybe chime in with a couple of other points. I'll give a quick shameless plug as well. I'm actually doing one of these TED Talk things at the Gather Cafe on culture Thursday at 2:15, and I'll be talking about this directly. I've screwed it up royally in my career, culture thing, and I've done it pretty well in other ventures in my career. But Madie, share with us, you know, what were some of the differences in culture that you noticed between South Africa and the U.S., and how did that incorporate into your venture?
Yeah, culture is huge. I think especially for going into any different culture, it's something that you should certainly look at. But especially going into the developing world, I think a lot of times the history has been we're trying to make something and just give it to somebody to help them, and then the tie kind of breaks off there and we don't do anything more. So it's not a sustainable solution at all. It lasts for a month or 2 months, and then it just dies. But we still think of ourselves as being good because we've provided somebody with a solution and we don't know that it's died in a month or 2. But going to those countries if it's possible, or knowing somebody who lives in those countries just to understand what their cultures are like and what needs that they have that you might not need to address in other places is really important. DREV is another company that does medical devices for people in the developing world, and they have a prosthetic knee that they've specifically made to be very flexible so that a lot of the people there sit on the ground cross-legged as a part of their daily life. And so the knee needs to be very flexible in order to sit on the ground. Also, there's a lot of stigma against people with disabilities, and particularly if they have a prosthetic device or some robotic-looking thing on them, they're going to be stigmatized. And so they tried to make their prosthetic knee have a very smooth profile so that underneath clothing or a sari, it's not going to show, or it's going to show less than something that's much more blocky. And it's also something interesting with prostheses. Here in the US, I think it's more accepted or even wanted for people to look bionic, whereas a lot in Guatemala, and I wouldn't say I necessarily got the feel for it in South Africa, but in Guatemala particularly, people don't want people to know because they want things to be the same color. They almost don't even care if it's functional or not, as long as it looks like a hand so that they can type with just one hand while they're at work. That's almost better for them. So that's something little anecdotes, I guess.
Wow, so fascinating. So there are cultures that want to look bionic.
Yeah.
Leave it to us to want to look bionic. And cultures that don't. And then, I mean, that's pivotal in developing a venture like that.
Right.
I think I'd add just one more point in terms of culture. Again, we could spend an entire hour easily on this. But I've been fairly successful with layers of culture, if you will. So as you're working around the world, these are core tenets of your culture, 3 or 4 points. But then, the other areas of the world we work in, Asia, Europe, et cetera, they own their culture there. But as an organization, these are things we uphold all together that are core and critical to who we are, but then be flexible, allow the culture to be local at that point. So let me check in on time here real quick. I think we only have a few minutes remaining. Why don't we take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up. I think this gentleman here, we'll do these 2, this gentleman and this woman here. Go ahead, sir.
So my question is for price point analysis in countries, and you have the same product that's in different countries. There's a system of price point analysis. And I'm curious from your experience based, how much violation have customers done to the price point analysis? Because I'm a violator. Like when I was in college, I bought all my books from a third world country because they were $10 versus $300 that I would pay in America. And that happens in corporate world as well. Classic example is Microsoft services, and so I'm just curious, how do you combine that? What sectors, any experience?
So specific, handling price around the world, and how do we do that specifically?
Well, I always started price usually by looking at what was available in the market and what competitors were charging for either that or a similar substitute. And I wasn't really shy about putting something up in price if I thought that particular market had a greater need or that was something that would be acceptable. I guess I might be misunderstanding your question. I just don't see that the price has to be equitable across the world. Like I would never do my product like that or my service, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, kind of. Well, like the iPhone is priced differently. So in Brazil, an iPhone, if it's unlocked, usually costs, let's just, to exaggerate a little bit, $2,000 US, right? So Brazilians come to Florida to buy an iPhone for $600. So there's a huge price discrepancy in certain countries that have high import taxes
Yeah, like it has certain relation with price versus branding. There's also price versus service. Like same cloud service in America would cost X amount of dollars that it would cost in Tajikistan.
Yeah.
right?
So for us, we don't come across it too much because we don't do direct to consumer type stuff, and businesses tend to sort of play by the rules a bit more. And we also vary our price in part because we try to understand what the market will bear, and in part because our cost basis is very different. So, for example, it is more expensive to employ people in Europe than it is here, and 85% of the cost of my company are the people who work in it, and so that factors into everything that we think through in order to drive pricing in a different country. But we don't see somebody in one part of the world buying from somewhere else. We can control that.
Yeah, and just one additional point, we see some of that, but not much at all. So I guess if you're in an industry where there's a lot of price manipulation and people traveling around to get your product, maybe manage to it, but we see very, very little of that type of exploitation. So
I would also say stay away from trying to tread currency conversions. I know a lot of people like to just do currency conversion plus X%, and that is where you get hot water to customers. So avoid that at all costs.
Good, great tip. All right, one more question. I'm going to wrap up. Go ahead.
Sure. My question is back to cultural based. It has to do with the Me Too movement. I was with a U.S. company, and we purchased a company in Quebec, and I moved to Montreal. Montreal had very different standards regarding what was considered appropriate dress, touching, and relationships in general in the workplace. Thoughts of the panel about how you manage U.S. expectations in an environment like that.
Great question.
Wow, you dropped this bomb on us at the very end. You couldn't have done this. No, but seriously, I mean, that's a really, really tough question. I'll chime in to start. To me, it's about respect, and where does that respect start? Does it start with the person first, and then where they are next, or does it start with where they are first, and then I don't have the answer, but when we work abroad, it's understanding. We have core tenets. We're never going to go against those core tenets, period. As an organization, whether we're in Boulder or whether we're in Singapore or whether we're in Paris. But then you've also got to respect the norm of the area that you're working, right? We certainly don't have all the answers here, and how presumptuous of us to put our cultural demands onto that particular part of the world. So there's not much concrete there, but we really have conversations around the respect of both the culture and where we're at, as well as our core tenets.
We've experienced this a couple of times. So certainly there are hard and fast rules about how people should feel safe and trusted and respected and those kind of things, and that those rules should never be violated. But where we've encountered problems, it's been when we've moved a U.S. person in an expat role into another country, and they've found a challenge with the way that country does things, drinks more alcohol, it socializes more, the boundaries are a little fuzzier between sort of work and play. But it's not been sort of infringements into the extent of people feeling threatened or disenfranchised. It's been more at that cultural level. So we did work to make sure that the people that we were sending into expat roles understood that there were sort of, there were lines under which we thought that nobody should cross, and that we would respect them, but that they were moving into a different culture, and they would experience some differences on the margins, and hopefully only on the margins, about how life would be in those offices and people's approach to relationships and work and the boundaries associated with those. And that's largely worked.
I have an example. Can I just share this real quick?
You've got 30 seconds.
Yes, I know. Here I go. But I also think a business has to be really smart about their business, because when I opened up my office in Asia, I went over there, to 8 countries, and I thought, this is it. I had been running my business for years, and I had real difficulty doing business in Asia, particularly in China, like big difficulty. Matter of fact, so much so I would travel with people. Look at this, right? It's hard to hide that I'm a blonde woman, And they would kind of do this to me. And it upset me. And I thought, well, this isn't very fair, blah, 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 blah. So you know what I did? I just went and hired a man to go do my business in Asia, and I actually took off and went like crazy. So I'm not going to change an entire culture around my business, but I'm pretty smart about my business. And I didn't have trouble doing that. You know, I didn't go as a secretary, but what I'm saying is I said, well, why don't you go do it? They want to deal with somebody in that gender. So I did. And it actually worked out great.
That's super smart.
Sorry, that was my story. How did I do?
Scrappy.